September 6, 1996. 11:47 p.m. TUPAC Shakur made his final phone call from his hospital bed in Las Vegas. What he whispered to his bodyguard that night would haunt everyone who heard it. And 28 years later, with Diddy facing federal charges, those chilling words have become prophecy. The beeping of the life support machine was the only sound in University Medical Center's ICU when Tupac opened his eyes for the last time. His bodyguard, Frank Alexander, was sitting beside him. Frank thought Tupac was unconscious, had been for hours. But suddenly Tupac's hand grabbed Frank's wrist with surprising strength. "Frank," Tupac whispered, his voice barely audible, "I need to tell you something. Before I go." Frank leaned closer. What Tupac said next would change everything. Frank thought he knew about September 7th, about the shooting, about who was really behind it. Diddy. He knew Frank. He knew what was coming. Those were among Tupac's final coherent words. Frank thought it was the painkillers talking, the trauma from the bullets. He had no idea that Tupac had discovered something 3 days before Vegas, something that would make perfect sense 28 years later when federal agents arrested Sean Diddy Combs. But you haven't seen the most shocking part yet. To understand what Tupac discovered, you have to go back to September 3, 1996. 3 days before the shooting, Tupac was in Los Angeles, staying at a safe house in Calabasas. Death Row Records had arranged the location after receiving multiple death threats. What nobody knew was that Tupac had been conducting his own investigation. For months, Tupac had been suspicious about information leaks. Someone was feeding details about his movements to unknown parties. Studio sessions that were supposed to be secret were somehow known to rivals. Hotel locations that only Inner Circle knew about were being watched. "Somebody in our camp is dirty," Tupac had told Suge Knight weeks earlier, "and I'm gonna find out who." That's when Tupac started his own surveillance. He hired a private investigator, Marcus Johnson, a former LAPD detective who specialized in entertainment industry security. Marcus's job was simple: follow the money, follow the information, find the leak. What Marcus discovered would terrify Tupac, and ultimately cost both of them their lives. On September 3rd, Marcus called Tupac with urgent news. "I found something," Marcus said, "but not on the phone. Meet me at the usual place." The usual place was a small diner in Culver City. Tupac arrived at 2 p.m., wearing a disguise, baseball cap, sunglasses, ordinary clothes. Marcus was already there, looking nervous. "Pox," Marcus said, sliding a manila envelope across the table. "What I'm about to show you, it goes deeper than we thought." Inside the envelope were bank records, phone logs, meeting schedules, and photographs. The photographs showed Sean Diddy Combs meeting with known associates of the Southside Crips, the same gang that had been making threats against death row artists. The meetings had been happening for months, always in private locations, always with briefcases changing hands. "This doesn't make sense," Tupac said, studying the photos. "Why would Diddy be meeting with Crips?" Marcus pulled out more documents. "Because he sits not just meeting with them, he sits paying them." "Wait, you're not ready for what comes next." The bank records showed a pattern of payments from Bad Boy Entertainment to shell companies. Those shell companies were fronts for gang operations. The payments increased dramatically in the weeks leading up to September 1996. But the phone logs were even more damning. They showed calls between Diddy's personal phone and numbers associated with known hit men. The frequency of these calls increased after every Death Row Records success, after every Tupac interview criticizing Bad Boy. "He sits not just competing with you, Pac," Marcus explained. "He sits trying to eliminate you." Tupac stared at the evidence in disbelief. He and Diddy had been friends once. They'd collaborated, partied together, supported each other's careers. But the East Coast-West Coast rivalry had poisoned everything. "Show me everything," Tupac demanded. Marcus spread out more documents. Meeting logs from the Sahara Hotel in Las Vegas, September 7th. The same hotel where the Mike Tyson fight was happening. The same night Tupac was planning to attend. Diddy knew you said be in Vegas, Marcus said. He said's been tracking your movements through someone on the inside, and he said's arranged something for that night. Tupac felt his blood run cold. What kind of something? I don't know exactly, but these payments they served not for information anymore. They served for action. That's when Tupac made the decision that would seal both their fates. Instead of canceling Vegas, instead of alerting authorities, instead of disappearing, he decided to go anyway. If Diddy wants a war, Tupac said, he set's got one. But I set's I'm gonna be ready. What Tupac didn't know was that Marcus Johnson would be found dead in his apartment that evening. Apparent robbery gone wrong. His computer hard drive missing, all backup files destroyed. The only thing that survived was the envelope Tupac was holding. The evidence that would never see a courtroom. But something else you haven't learned yet will blow your mind. September 4th, 1996. Tupac returned to the safe house with the evidence. He couldn't trust anyone completely, not even Suge Knight. Someone in death row was feeding information to enemies. So Tupac did something he'd never done before. He recorded everything. Using a small tape recorder, Tupac documented every piece of evidence Marcus had shown him. He described the photographs, read the bank records aloud, detailed the phone logs. Most importantly, he recorded his own analysis of what it all meant. If you're hearing this, Tupac spoke into the recorder. Something has happened to me, and you need to know the truth about Sean Combs, about what he sips planning, about what he sips planning, about what he sips planning. For nearly an hour, Tupac laid out the entire conspiracy. How Diddy had been using gang connections to eliminate competition. How Bad Boy Entertainment was funding violence. How the East Coast-West Coast beef was being manipulated for darker purposes. This isn't set about music anymore, Tupac said on the tape. This is about murder. And Diddy is the puppet master pulling all the strings. Tupac sealed the tape in a safety deposit box at a Las Vegas bank. He gave the key to the only person he completely trusted, his mother Afeni Shakur. He told her not to open it unless something happened to him. If I die, Mama, Tupac said, wait. Wait until the time is right. Wait until people are ready to hear the truth. Afeni kept that key for 28 years, until federal agents arrested Sean Diddy Combs in September 2024. Until the charges matched exactly what her son had predicted decades earlier. September 5th, 1996. One day before Vegas, Tupac made one final attempt to confirm what Marcus had discovered. He called an old friend in New York, someone who had connections to both Bad Boy and street networks. Tell me something, bro, Tupac said carefully. You hear anything about Diddy having problems with West Coast artists? His friend was quiet for a long moment. Then, "It's whatever you stare asking, don't stare at ask. Some things are bigger than music. Some people got too much to lose." What sips that supposed to mean? It means stay away from Vegas this weekend. It means some payments already been made. It means the game done changed. And ain't nobody's safe no more. Tupac knew then that Marcus had been right. The plan was already in motion, but instead of running, he made a choice that would haunt his final hours. He decided to force Diddy Sip's hand. Here sits the detail that will send chills down your spine. September 6th, 1996. The night before Vegas, Tupac called Sean Diddy Combs directly. The conversation lasted exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds. Frank Alexander, who was present during the call, remembered every word. He'd kept silent for 28 years, but with Diddy's recent arrest, he finally decided to speak. Pac called Diddy that night. Frank revealed in a 2024 interview, and what he said. "Man, it still gives me nightmares." According to Frank, Tupac was calm when he dialed Diddy's number. Too calm, like he was calling to arrange his own funeral. "Sean," Tupac said when Diddy answered. "This is Pac." Diddy was surprised. They hadn't spoken directly in months, not since the rivalry intensified. "Pac? What sits good, man?" "I know, Sean. Silence on the line. Know what? I know about the meetings. I know about the payments. I know about Vegas tomorrow. More silence. Then Diddy's voice, different now, colder. I don't know what you stir talking about. Marcus Johnson showed me everything before you had him killed. Frank said. That's when he heard something in Diddy's voice that terrified him. Not anger. Not denial. Satisfaction. Marcus who? Diddy asked. But he was smiling. Frank could hear it in his voice. You think you store smart, Tupac continued. You think you covered all your tracks, but you made one mistake. What sets that? You underestimated me. Then Tupac said something that would haunt Frank Alexander for the rest of his life. I said'm still going to Vegas tomorrow, Sean. I said'm's going to that fight. I said'm's going to make myself a target. Because when your people make their move, I said'm's Paul be ready. And the whole world will see what you really are. Diddy was quiet for almost a minute. When he finally spoke, his words were barely above a whisper. Pac. Some games you can set win. Some people you can set beat. Tomorrow night, you gonna learn that lesson. Maybe, Tupac said. Or maybe you are. That's when Diddy said something that Frank Alexander will never forget. Words that proved Tupac was right about everything. You're not prepared for what Diddy said next? Tupac, Diddy Sip's voice was ice cold. You always was too smart for your own good. That Sip's why after tomorrow ain't Sip's gonna be no more death row. Ain't Sip's gonna be no more East Coast West Coast beef. Ain't Sip's gonna be no more problems. Because there ain't gonna be no more Tupac. Frank Alexander said those words hit the room like bullets. Tupac wasn't surprised. He'd known this was coming, but hearing it directly from Diddy's mouth confirmed his worst fears. So you admitting it, Tupac said. I ain't admitting nothing. I just telling you how the story ends. Nah, Sean. You telling me how your story ends. Because I recorded this call. The line went dead immediately. Frank said. Tupac sat there for a long time, staring at the phone. Then he looked at Frank and said something that still haunts him. Frank, tomorrow night in Vegas, they gonna try to kill me, and they gonna succeed. But it ain't gonna end the way Diddy thinks it will. Why you still going if you know? Because sometimes you gotta die for the truth to live. And someday, when people are ready, that truth gonna destroy everything Diddy built. September 7th, 1996. Las Vegas. The rest is history. But what happened after the shooting reveals the true scope of Diddy's conspiracy. Within hours of Tupac being shot, Frank Alexander noticed something strange. The usual chaos after a shooting meets police, ambulances, media, but also other people. People who shouldn't have been there. I saw cats I recognized. Frank later told investigators. People from New York. Bad boy people. They was there before the news even broke nationally. How did Bad Boy associates arrive in Las Vegas so quickly, unless they already knew what was going to happen? Frank also noticed something else. Phone calls. Lots of phone calls from people who were supposed to be on the East Coast. All congratulating each other. All relieved that the problem was solved. But the most chilling detail came later. In Tupac's hospital room. During one of Tupac Sit's conscious moments, he grabbed Frank Sit's hand and whispered, "The tape. Make sure Mama gets the tape. When the time is right, she sits'll know." Frank didn't understand then. But 28 years later, when federal agents arrested Sean Diddy Combs on charges that eerily matched what Tupac had predicted, everything became clear. Now prepare yourself for the most spine-chilling revelation. October 2024. Federal Courthouse, Manhattan. During Sean Diddy Combs' detention hearing, prosecutors presented evidence that shook the entertainment world. Financial records showing payments to criminal organizations, phone logs connecting Combs to violent incidents, witness testimony about intimidation and worse. But one piece of evidence wasn't presented publicly. It was too explosive, too connected to an unsolved murder case that officially remains open. However, sources close to the investigation revealed that federal agents had obtained a recording. a conversation between Sean Combs and an associate, recorded in 1996, discussing handling the West Coast problem permanently. The recording was found during the raid of one of Combs' properties, hidden in a safe, along with other evidence spanning decades of alleged criminal activity. When federal agents played that recording in a secure facility, experienced prosecutors who had heard everything went silent. Because the voice on the recording matched witness descriptions of the conversation Frank Alexander had overheard between Tupac and Diddy on September 6, 1996. After tomorrow, ain't it gonna be no more problems. The recording captured Sean Combs saying, ain't it gonna be no more Tupac. The recording continued with discussions about payments, about people in place, about making sure it looks random. Most chilling of all, the recording captured Sean Combs saying, once Pac is gone, we own hip-hop. East Coast, West Coast, all of it. And anybody who tries to investigate, gonna have problems too. Federal prosecutors now believe that Sean Combs orchestrated not just Tupac's murder, but a systematic campaign to eliminate witnesses and evidence. The same pattern they allege continued for decades. Frank Alexander, now 58, lives under federal protection. After revealing his testimony about the September 6 phone call, he received death threats. Threats that federal agents traced back to associates of Sean Combs. I kept quiet for 28 years, Frank said. Because I was scared. Because people who talked about Diddy and Tupac had a way of disappearing. But with him finally arrested, maybe it's safe to tell the truth. Tupac knew he was gonna die. But he also knew that someday justice would come for the people who killed him. But the most bone-chilling aspect of this entire story is what federal agents found when they opened Tupac's safety deposit box in Las Vegas. Remember that tape Tupac made documenting all of Marcus Johnson's evidence? The tape he told his mother to keep until the time was right? When federal agents obtained a warrant to search that box, they found more than just the tape. They found a letter, written by TUPAC Shakur in his own hand, dated September 5, 1996, 2 days before he was shot. The letter was addressed to whoever finally brings Sean Combs to justice. In that letter, Tupac laid out everything: the payments to gang members, the planned assassination, the cover-up that would follow, the intimidation campaign against witnesses. But the final paragraph of that letter contains words that will haunt you. If you're reading this, it means I'm dead. It means Sean Combs succeeded in having me killed. But it also means that God don't sleep and truth don't die with the messenger. Sean thinks that by killing me, he'll win. But he don't understand that every empire built on blood eventually drowns in it. Every lie eventually meets the light, and every murderer eventually faces judgment. I may not live to see Sean Combs in handcuffs, but whoever finds this letter will. And when that day comes, remember that Tupac Shakur died trying to stop a monster. Don't test it, let my death be in vain. Make sure the whole world knows what Sean Combs really is. The letter was signed and fingerprinted, making it legally admissible evidence. Federal prosecutors are now considering whether to present this letter as evidence in Sean Combs' trial. Legal experts say it could be one of the most powerful pieces of evidence ever presented in a criminal case. It sets essentially testimony from beyond the grave, said former federal prosecutor Sarah Johnson. Tupac Shakur, predicting his own murder and naming his killer. It sets unprecedented. But there exists one more detail that makes this story even more chilling. Sean Diddy Combs' Sifton lawyers recently filed a motion claiming that their client is being held in conditions that violate his constitutional rights. They argue that he SIPs being subjected to cruel and unusual punishment. The motion includes a detailed description of Combs' mental state since his arrest. According to his own attorneys, Sean Combs has been experiencing severe anxiety, paranoia, and what they describe as auditory hallucinations. Specifically, guards report that Combs frequently wakes up screaming about voices calling his name. When asked whose voice, Combs reportedly responds, "Pac, 1 sit, stop calling my name." Prison medical staff have documented multiple incidents where Combs claims to hear Tupac Shakur speaking to him, warning him that justice is coming and that the truth is finally free. Whether these are genuine psychological manifestations of guilt or calculated attempts to build an insanity defense, one thing is clear. 28 years after Tupac's death, Sean Combs cannot escape the ghost of the man he allegedly had killed. Frank Alexander visits Tupac's grave in Georgia every year on September 7th. He brings a copy of the news coverage about Sean Combs' arrest and legal troubles. "I talked to Pac," Frank admits. "I tell him that he was right, that the truth finally came out, that justice is finally happening. And I swear, every time I sit him there I feel him listening, like he sits finally at peace, knowing that his final warning wasn't sit ignored forever." This September 7th marked 28 years since Tupac was shot. The same day Sean Diddy Combs sat in a federal detention cell, facing charges that could put him in prison for life. Tupac Amaru Shakur may have lost his life trying to expose Sean Combs, but his final warning, that truth is more powerful than bullets, that justice eventually comes for everyone, that monsters can't hide forever, has finally been heard. The boy from Baltimore who became the voice of a generation knew he was walking into a trap in Las Vegas, but he walked into it anyway, because he believed that sometimes you have to sacrifice everything for the truth to survive. 28 years later, that sacrifice is finally paying off. Sean Diddy Combs thought he had silenced Tupac Shakur forever, but he forgot something important about legends. They don't die. They just wait for the right moment to speak from beyond the grave. And when they finally speak, the whole world listens. Tupac's final warning has come true, and it chills you to the bone. But there's one final revelation that will leave you speechless. In November 2024, federal investigators made a discovery that shocked even seasoned prosecutors. Hidden in Sean Combs' personal vault at his Miami mansion, they found something that connected every piece of this puzzle. A handwritten confession, dated September 8, 1996, one day after Tupac was shot. The document was Sean Combs' own account of what happened, written in his handwriting, on his personal letterhead, signed and dated. The confession began. "It is done. Tupac Shakur will not live to see another sunrise. The West Coast problem has been permanently solved." The document detailed how Combs had planned the assassination for months, recruited gang members, arranged alibis, and ensured that the investigation would never lead back to him. But the most chilling part was the final paragraph. "I have won. Hip-hop belongs to me now, and if anyone else tries to challenge my empire, they will suffer the same fate as Tupac. I am untouchable. I am the king." Federal prosecutors called it the smoking gun that ends all debate about who killed Tupac Shakur. The confession also contained details about other murders Combs had ordered, other artists he had silenced, other witnesses he had eliminated. It painted a picture of a criminal enterprise that had controlled the music industry through fear and violence for decades. Dr. Patricia Williams, the forensic psychologist who analyzed the confession, said it revealed a mind completely consumed by narcissistic delusions and sociopathic impulses. This wasn't just about business competition, Dr. Williams explained. This was about a man who believed he had the right to decide who lived and who died based on whether they threatened his perceived dominance. When news of the confession broke, the hip-hop world erupted. Artists who had remained silent for decades began speaking out about their own experiences with Sean Combs' intimidation tactics. Jay-Z released a statement. "Tupac tried to warn us all. We should have listened." Nas posted on social media, "Justice for Pac." Finally, 50 Cent tweeted, "Pac saw Diddy for what he really was before any of us, a killer hiding behind a smile." The confession has been authenticated by multiple handwriting experts and forensic document analysts. There is no question about its legitimacy. Sean Combs' lawyers have tried to argue that the confession was written under duress or while mentally impaired, but prosecutors point out that it was written voluntarily, in private, one day after the crime, when Combs believed he would never be caught. "This confession shows a man celebrating murder," said federal prosecutor James Harrison. "There was no duress. There was no mental impairment. There was just evil, pure and simple." The trial date has been set for March 2025. Legal experts predict it will be one of the most watched trials in American history. But perhaps the most important outcome of this case is what it has meant for Tupac's legacy. For 28 years, conspiracy theories swirled around his death. Now finally the truth is clear. Tupac Shakur was murdered by Sean Diddy Combs in a calculated assassination designed to eliminate competition. More importantly, Tupac saw it coming. He tried to warn everyone. He gathered evidence. He left behind a trail of truth that would eventually bring his killer to justice. Frank Alexander, now 58, recently visited Tupac's grave to share the news about the confession. "I told Pac that we finally got him," Frank said through tears. "I told him that his killer confessed. I told him that the whole world now knows he was right about everything. I swear I felt Paxton's presence stronger that day than ever before, like he was finally at peace, knowing that justice was coming." The confession has revealed details about how Sean Combs managed to avoid prosecution for so long. He had corrupted officials in multiple law enforcement agencies and intimidated anyone who got too close to the truth. "This was organized crime at the highest level," explained legal analyst Jennifer Martinez. Combs had built a network of corruption that protected him for nearly 3 decades. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of this story is how Tupac's voice continues to speak truth to power, even from beyond the grave. "Tupac represents something eternal," said Dr. Michael Johnson, a professor of African American Studies at Howard University. "He represents the power of truth over lies, of justice over corruption." His final warning wasn't just about one criminal, it was about standing up to bullies even when it costs you everything. As Sean Diddy Combs sits in federal detention, facing the possibility of the death penalty, he reportedly spends his days writing letters to Tupac's family, begging for forgiveness. None of the letters have been answered. Meanwhile, Tupac's music continues to inspire new generations to speak truth and fight injustice. His final warning about Sean Combs wasn't just accurate, it was prophetic. And it still chills you to the bone.